Welcome to the Mike and Allison After Hours podcast with your hosts, Mshelah and Allison Haas, talking business with real business owners in the Mid-Atlantic region. Today's episode is sponsored by Advantage Industries. When you need business technology, get Advantage Industries to protect and promote your business. To learn more, go to www.getadvantage.com and schedule your first meeting to see if you qualify for a free network scan.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mike and Allison After Hours. I am your host, Mshelah, and with me is the always courteous and sometimes constructive Alison Haas. Allison, how the heck are you today?
Caffeinated. How are you?
Caffeinated. Yeah, I had 3 cups already. I've had to switch to quality H2O to get me through the next few hours because my hands are already shaking. All right. So first of all, to our listening audience, thank you all so much. As we have said the last few weeks, we're everywhere now. You can watch the show on the Advantage Industries YouTube channel. You can listen to us on basically any podcast platform you want to. iTunes, Spotify, TuneIn, Stitcher, Podbean, Pandora. And perhaps my favorite now is you can say, Alexa, play the Mike and Allison After Hours podcast. And boom, it'll fire it right up. That's probably the nerdiest thing for me because I definitely have echoes all over my house, and I'm a big Amazon shopper and buyer. So I think that's super cool. So for those of you listening, be sure to give us a like, give us a comment, give us a share, make this out there because we gave away Allison's book last episode, you may remember, and we have a new giveaway. In fact, we have 2 of them. So you may remember a couple months back, we had Andrew Freedman, one of the principals from Shift, on our show. And he announced that he was going to be publishing a new book called Thrive. And that book is now out. I got my copy, started reading it the other day. And if you are a business owner and you're looking to take your business to the next step, you want to get a copy of this book. So we're going to make it easier for you. So giveaway number 1, give a like, give a comment, give a share. Mention us on social media. Help us get the word out about this show because June 1st, we're going to first give away an autographed copy of Andrew's book, Thrive. And then Andrew laid down a nice bonus for us. So for you business owners that have 10 or more employees, Andrew is giving away a free 1-hour consultation with his firm, which, folks, if you have not looked up Shift yet, and if you have not researched Andrew, do that. That 1 hour is worth a lot of money. And he is doing that because he wants to help get the word out, not only about our show, but about his new book. And I think you're going to be really impressed. Go back and listen to that episode again, in case you weren't impressed the first time around. But so anyway, Allison, what's going on in your end of the universe?
Well, I just have to share that my mental health has demanded that I get the heck out of here. So in 2 weeks, I'm on a plane to Puerto Rico. So that's number 1. And I will be recording with you from the beach. So I hope you don't get too jealous because that's happening. I don't want to reschedule our already rescheduled podcast that week. But, Mike, I'm good. I'm grateful. I feel re-energized. It might be the espresso in my coffee, but I really think that we're onto something here. We're reaching more people. I'm getting a lot of constructive feedback and positive vibes from my prospects that are listening to us. And it's also keeping me accountable, right? Because you and I talk about best practices in sales and leadership. Mm-hmm. So hell, if I'm going to say something and then not do what I say, right? And so it really inspired me, and you inspire me. Here's some cheese for your morning, to be the best professional that I can be and the best human that I can be in my day to day. And not only talk the talk, but walk the walk after I've talked it.
Yeah, I love that. I've forgotten which book I read this in, but it might have been a Darren Hardy book now that I think about it. But the idea that if you make your goals public, it raises your accountability. And I've always been very shy to do that, to make my goals public. But this show does rather force us to be rather transparent and public, doesn't it?
It does, especially about the follow-up with your already existing client base. That's really been in my mind lately. And I'm sincere when I tell people before they come on, like, I'm here for you. But then one thing comes and another, and it's not a conscious, intentional forgetting of them. It's just I have a service team and they work with them. And so it's this has helped me bring that back to the forefront. But speaking of books, so I just finished 2. Thank you. They are back in the mail to you. The Buddhist boot camp was awesome. Yes. Super readable, right? And applicable.
Yeah, Timber Hawkeye's the best.
Yeah, it was
my
great.
Spirit animal.
I wanted to just keep turning the page, but I forced myself to sit on a story or an entry if it captivated me enough to do so, especially around gratitude. But I also just finished, and I was going to grab it, but it's behind me, Black Sheep. And it is about defining your true 5 core values. And I had to really work on it because I know the preliminary things that sit on top that I can point to, right? Accountability, discipline, commitment, competitiveness, but like what's the driver underneath of those? And there's a workshop or worksheet online that helps guide you and steer you. I selected about 1,500 adjectives to describe what I find important, but then it helps funnel that all down into one value. So I just did that, and I have to say it was super useful. I would check it out.
Yeah, please send me a copy of that, because you just touched on something that, again, I have struggled with, and I know a lot of companies do. And again, this was from one of the Dr. Stephen Covey 7 Habits books. But the notion of having a mission statement, having a vision statement for your company. And so many companies, when they develop that, it's very fluffy and it's very pleasing.
Yep.
Which means that it's not concrete, it's not specific.
Yep.
And in Dr. Covey's book, he talks about one of the premier hotel chains, and I forget which one. He admired their very clear and concise mission statement. And he was staying at one of their hotels, giving a presentation, and he, at the last minute, needed something. And he spoke to like a janitor out in the hallway and said, "Excuse me, sir." And the janitor immediately snapped to attention and said, "How can I help you, sir?" And he said, "This is what I need." He goes, "Give me 5 minutes and I'll take care of it for you." And he brought it back to him and he said to me, he said to the janitor, you're just a janitor." He goes, I don't mean to be critical of that, but I'm exceptionally impressed by the level of attention and care that you gave to something that's obviously outside of the scope of your job. And he said, "No, it's not. Would you like to see our hotel's mission statement?" He goes, "Well, I'm very impressed with the company's mission statement." He goes, "Yes, but our hotel, our actual location has its own." And he read it to him. And Dr. Covey commented, this is a crystallization of what matters and what makes an organization great. And again, so many times mission statements, they're fluffy, right?
Yep.
And they don't really get to the core of what makes a company great. And it's platitudes, and people just don't tend to take it seriously. We've all worked for organizations like that, where we felt like they're talking out of both sides of their mouth. Like you're saying this, but you're doing this, and your actions are what you actually are, not what you say.
Yep.
So, fascinating. I find that fascinating.
I challenge, the audience, just look up a couple companies, right? If you have an industry that you target specifically, just jump on 5 or 6 websites of companies in that industry. And I would bet money that they all either sound exactly the same, right? There's no differentiator between missions. And there's no descriptor, as in, if you didn't know what industry they were in or what region or whatever, and you read their mission statement, I'd have no idea what the hell they did, right?
To consistently drive revenue for our stakeholders. They all say something like that.
Welcome to corporate America. Yeah, like I when I'm doing my prospecting and trying to educate myself on whom I'm going to be speaking, I mean, I'm like, what do you do? Right? I don't understand. I need to get a dictionary out sometimes. And I just, longer is not better. Fancier is not better. But really, what separates you from the pack? And I agree with you. It is hard to come up with a true mission statement and value. And I think it starts with the individual, right? And then that can lead out to the rest of the leaders and your company, because it ultimately started with one person anyway.
Yeah, and that's also a really important point to consider, because we've all heard the term, the pace of the team is the pace of the leader. And the leader sets the culture, leader sets the model. And again, I don't envy anybody that has to be in that position.
Yep.
Because it's not easy. But there is a responsibility, there's a weight that comes with that you have to hire people that are mentally in alignment with what you want. And it can't just simply be that they're good at what they do.
Yeah.
It has to be, do they buy into how you want to go about doing things?
Yep. Yep.
So I forgot to mention, by the way, we do have a guest coming on today. He'll be joining us in about 15, 20 minutes. And it's Leonardo McClarty. He is the president and CEO of the Howard County Chamber of Commerce. And we're doing a nice little Howard County theme these next few episodes, because we got Leonardo on today. Next time, we're going to have on the executive director from the ARC of Howard County. And then the episode after that, we're having on Marianne Scully, the CEO and president of Howard Bank. So we've got this nice Howard County theme going on the next 3 episodes, which is going to be a lot of fun. So before Allison and I started recording, we always do a few minutes in the green room and chat and comment on the fact that we're both wearing blue shirts and, things of that nature. And I told her this story. I'll share it with my audience here, because sales is not easy.
No.
And we've, that's an underlying theme, because sales are what enable a business to stay in business ultimately. And if anybody could do this job, then it wouldn't be as financially rewarding as it can be.
Yep.
One of the biggest challenges is when you talk to a prospective client and they just don't believe you. And I don't mean they think you're lying. They're not taking seriously what you're relaying to them. So I had a meeting since our last episode recording with a couple principals in a government contracting business to talk about CMMC, Cyber Maturity Model Certification, which is my big thing in 2021. That's where I'm spending most of my time with new prospective clients. And this is basically a law coming down from the Department of Defense. It simply says, if you want to do business with the Department of Defense, you have to go through this Cyber Maturity Model Certification process. It is expensive and it is time consuming. The process is going to take a good 9 months to go from end to end. And we've speculated that a lot of small government contractors are just going to simply opt out of either A, no longer being in the government contract business, or B, they're going to merge with larger government contractors, because that's the only way they can financially survive. So I'm speaking with these 2 principals, and we're talking about, in specific, they use the Google Suite for, so they're using Gmail and Google Calendar and Google Sheets and the Google Suite of products, which are not certifiable under CMMC. They're not. And in fact, if you go and Google about CMMC, you'll see that many of their benchmark solutions do not fall under compliance with CMMC. And to our knowledge, there's no plan of that happening anytime soon. They have not said definitively yes or definitively no. But what we do know is that the DoD is going to start having CMMC requirements on bids in fall of 2021.
Wow.
Which means that you have 7 months to get this worked out.
Wow.
And this business owner and his partner are both of the mind, yeah, well, we're not sure we have to do that, so we're not going to until we're told to. I'm like, look, again, this is expensive and it's time consuming. So start working on it now. Break it into little manageable chunks Because if you try to do the equivalent of cramming the night before the final exam, you're gonna fail. And it just, so I made that comment to Allison, and she made a very, again, a very constructive and curious statement that if you lived through 2020, you cannot say to yourself, well, that's never going to happen to me.
Seriously, man. Like I'm dying right now re-listening, listening to this again. Like, were you not present for this entire, what we're still enduring almost a year later? Actually, in one month, literally, it'll be a year, right? The 16th of March, we were all condemned to our homes. It's like, you can no longer live under a rock and say, oh, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen to me, to my business, to my family, in my lifetime. It's a crock of you know what. And we always say it, like insurance policies. It's not if, it's when. And, especially in dealing with crisis. And I think the pandemic shed a lot of light on this from the HR side of things and IT, but, like the importance of training and development, the importance of compliance, the importance of cross training, and be prepared, right? Like, wouldn't you rather be prepared and then be able to relax at night and maybe have dinner with your family instead of all the dominoes falling down in one shot and you have nothing ready to arm yourself and guard yourself? And I don't know. I mean, as a former business owner and a daughter of 2 and a girlfriend of 1, right? Like, I see the stress when you don't do what you could do to prepare yourself. And of course it's expensive, but then compared to what, right? Like, what are you comparing this cost to? Your quality of life, the manageability of your life, the quality of your product, your ability to serve your customer base, existing and future. Anyway, clearly I could go on and on. I get quite passionate about this. People are amazing animals.
Yeah, and if I sit in the owner's chair for a moment, I certainly recognize why they deflect off of these things.
Yeah.
The way that, again, back to emotional intelligence, the way that our lizard brain, our fight or flight mentality is wired into our very being is we look for alerts. Is there something in the corner that's going to get me?
Yep.
Am I in a room with a tiger? A tiger's faster than me. And I know there are people that are listening to this going, well, that doesn't really happen. It absolutely happens. One of my favorite comedians, George Carlin, very wisely said before he passed away, we're barely out of the jungle. And find the skit sometime from George Carlin, but he talks about the fact that we could completely deconstruct humanity with about a week of not having electrical power. That's about how long it would take before everything that we consider formal. I don't mean one location, but if the United States suddenly didn't have electrical power, that things would basically go back to cavemen and cavewomen fighting it out in the jungles and in the deserts and in the forests in about a week.
Yeah. Go to Texas right now. A bunch of my friends don't have power. It's not actually funny. I hope they're not listening. I'm not laughing at you.
But it's a very wise point that we, on a day-to-day basis, maybe we don't reflect on it.
Right.
That we no matter how well educated you are, no matter how well cultured you are, this fight or flight dictates so much of what we perceive as a threat and what we don't perceive as a threat. And as a result of that, things that are on the horizon tend to not bother us. One of the biggest reasons that people don't get concerned, and not everybody, but there's a segment of our population that doesn't get concerned about global warming because they can't see it in front of them. Because these are long range problems.
Right.
And you can go through a laundry list of things like that.
Yep.
That there's data, that there's science that, shows you these things are happening, but people go, well, it's not in front of me. So if it's not in front of me, I'm not worried about it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, being a business leader, a lot of times that's what you have to do, right?
Yep.
You have to be reactive instead of proactive. And our show is about start becoming proactive so that you're less and less reactive.
Right. Well, and I think humans are hardwired to not do anything until it hurts, until we're forced, until we're backed into the corner, right? Well, it's working so far, so I'm just going to press my luck and just keep plodding along until the fire literally has totally taken over, and until I can see the volcanic eruption and feel it. And like you just said, this is about being proactive. And of course, you have to be reactive. That's the day-to-day job. But the ability to be strategically minded so that you can better plan for the future and set yourself up for success and less stress. Absolutely.
Yeah. And again, my industry, IT, and your industry, HR, the core principle is a proactive approach.
Yes.
To supporting a customer and their business.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think I've mentioned this on other shows when we talk about adding in a new prospective client, we have something we use called GWC, which is gets it, wants it, and capable of it. Does this customer GWC? Do they get it? Do they want it? Are they capable of it? Because sometimes you'll talk to a customer and you'll be explaining what you do, and they're like, and? Like, okay, you don't get it.
Right.
And I don't know that me explaining this to you for another 45 minutes is going to help you get it.
Right. Yes. Amen.
and that's a real challenge. Our marketing company, they frequently bring article opportunities to us, meaning they'll have some writer that says, hey, I want an IT expert's opinion on this. And it's funny, I've answered about a dozen of these over the last 6 months, and my answer, I've almost distilled it down to like 3 or 4 things. And answer number 1 is be proactive. Mm-hmm. Get your business audited from a technology standpoint, because I know 80% of you have never done that voluntarily. Know it. So make the investment now. Because if you do it now, it costs the audit itself costs less.
Yep.
Getting the repairs or the remediation done will be easier to manage because you can broker it out over time.
Yes.
And that when you have an issue, you now have the documentation to protect the finances of your business. And that's the hardest thing for me to get across to people. Now, everybody knows the idea of spend $1 to make 3. But when it comes down to day-to-day operations, they're very reluctant to do that, which is why I will often get resistance to meet, and you will often get resistance to meet, right?
Yep. Yeah, the urgency, right? And I have a lot of meetings like that where it's like timing. Right? When should we implement this? And I'm like, well, I can't answer that for you, but I can give you some stories of why sooner than later is always better. Not just because I'm eager to earn your business now. This is only somewhat selfish, but because quite literally, when you do need us and you turn around and we're not available, it's not too late, as in there's no coming back from it, but
sometimes that's the case.
Your progress. And you are right. Yeah, sometimes it is, right? I mean, I think, again, going back to 2020 showed us so much of how many gaps are in business that we're just ill prepared to deal with. And some of it, there was absolutely no working around. You had to furlough some people. There's nothing you could have done about that. But the ability to pivot, right? There were huge gaps there. And some people are still reeling from that, and some people haven't recovered and aren't going to. So,
yeah. And a story that has not been terribly public since the pandemic started. We all know that, in particular, the hospitality and entertainment industries have been battered into the ground. Yep. We're seeing big names like Ruby Tuesday go down because they didn't have the money to survive. And so for every Ruby Tuesday, there's 1,000 small restaurant owners that didn't survive.
Yeah.
And people were displaced from their jobs. So that part is public. But the part that's not really public, and again, people are probably peripherally aware of this, is when that, all right, we have to go virtual happened. From a technology standpoint, most businesses were not ready.
Yeah.
So I know we were very busy those first, call it 3-4 weeks of the pandemic, getting our customers virtualized, making sure they had enough VPNs, making sure that they had the right firewall, getting everything lined up so that they could work efficiently from home. But there are plenty of companies that just didn't bother to do those things that way.
Yeah.
And as a result, they were victims of a cybersecurity breach. That breach circled back around to them. They were hit with penalties. They were hit with remediation costs. They were hit with auditing costs.
Yeah.
They don't exist anymore.
Right.
And I know you can tell stories about how that's impacted HR, because we had a couple people that they couldn't handle the virtual environment, and it was a bit of an HR nightmare.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And the topic that's hot in my brain with this conversation is cross training, right? And the ability to fill different roles, even if it's temporary. And going back to the mission, right? Why should I care? Why does it matter? And we had our virtual convention a couple weeks ago, and when our CEO was speaking, I knew why I work for the organization I work for, right? Like, he's been able to have that trickle effect because he is so clear about who he is, what he cares about, and then what he wants his organization to look like. And there's 3,500 of us, right? So that's really impressive. And I connected to him right through the screen, and I'm like, this is why I'm here. In fact, I called you shortly after, like, hey, I'm feeling this right now. So it all ties together. Right. I know sometimes it seems like we may go in a direction, but at the end of the day, it's all relevant and it all ties together. And there's just so many moving parts. Right. And that's why we go back to EQ and not trying to do this alone. Right. Like, let people help you who are better at it than you, who have a mind for it, an objective view.
Yep. Hey, Allison.
All right.
It's guest time. Leonardo, good morning. Welcome to Mike and Allison After Hours. How are you today, my friend?
I'm doing fine. How about yourself?
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Our pleasure.
All right. So I'm going to do just a quick little intro. So Leonardo McClarty, he is the president and CEO of the Howard County Chamber of Commerce, located right here in Howard County, Maryland. And the Howard County Chamber is a membership organization dedicated to helping businesses, from sole proprietors to large international firms, grow and succeed. With the power of 700 members that encompass more than 1,700,000 employees, the Chamber is an effective partner with elected officials and advocates for the interests of the business community. So, Leonardo, it is super exciting to have you on the show today.
Well, thank you for having me, and I'm just looking forward to talking and just having some good conversation. Certainly, anytime I have the opportunity to talk about the Chamber and the work that we're doing here in the county, it's always appreciated.
Yeah, and it's funny. I was telling Allison at the beginning of the show, Leonardo, we're doing a nice little Howard County theme these next 3 episodes. We're kicking it off with you. And then next episode, we're having the executive director from the ARC of Howard County on.
Okay.
And then after that, we're having on Marianne Scully from Howard Bank.
Oh, excellent.
So we've got a nice little trifecta of 3 very Howard County-centric episodes coming up, which is the core of our business community, both myself and Allison. So
even more partial.
No, those are some great folks to have on, and certainly I think Howard Bank has been a great community partner. They've been a member of the Chamber and have had representatives on our board, and as well as on a number of other organizations here in the county, and certainly the ARC. They really are special people over there. I know we even had an opportunity to support them. I guess it was actually last year. Matter of fact, one of the few in-person things we could do. It was in, I think, January. We were over as part of the MLK Day of Service, and so we were able to go, and we painted with some of the the adults over there, as well as also I think we might have even painted a room or two. But I was in one of the groups that was doing artwork, and so that was quite interesting, trying to tap into a creative side that I don't too much have, at least not when it comes to a paintbrush.
Well, how awesome is that? What a way to volunteer, right? To do something outside of your comfort zone and just frankly have some fun, right?
No, it is. And, you know, one of the things that we started about maybe give or take 2 or 3 years ago was trying to do something on the King Day. We typically don't actually have, I guess you could say, quote, where we maybe close the office, but we said what we would do is we would use that time to go and volunteer out in the community. And so it's one of those things where oftentimes as a chamber and business organization, we're often asking, you know, businesses like, you know, yours and Allison's to support our efforts. And so on a day of service, it was like, okay, well, let's, you know, so one year we were over at Glenmar United Methodist Church, and we were putting together meals for, I think one of the organizations they were working with, I think in Baltimore City. Another time we were over at, let's see, where else have we been? Over at Community Action Council. And I think that was probably the coldest year by far because we were actually out on the loading dock. And so we were receiving the food as it was being delivered and sorting it into various bins and so forth. But again, it's, you know, it just helps you put things in perspective in terms of, you know, really how oftentimes, you know, how fortunate we really are when you just look at other people's circumstances.
Yeah, Leonardo, I love that commentary that you just ran through, and I talk about this almost every episode. I'm a service first person, so you know I'm on the ambassador committee with the Howard County Chamber, and I serve on the board of directors for a nonprofit in Hunt Valley, and I have a couple of friends that run a nonprofit in Baltimore City that gives away meals to the homeless. And I've volunteered with them probably like a half a dozen times. And I've also donated money. I've also donated food supplies to them. Because you're right. It gives you perspective. And it gives you two glaring things. So, one, if you're having a down day, there's always somebody that would be grateful to switch roles with you in a heartbeat. So that's the first thing that I always get out of those. And the second is, when you put a label on somebody like homeless or mentally disabled, or you identify them, you know, by their race or by their gender or by their age, you're really selling them short because they are first and foremost a person. And if you start there, say, this is a person and I am a person. And despite where we are in our lives, we're feeling and thinking and experiencing a lot of the same things. Again, it gives you tremendous perspective. So thank you for getting me on my soapbox.
No, you're correct. I mean, it's just like even, you know, sometimes, you know, obviously as a chamber, we do a lot of things, even, you know, on the policy front. And one of the things that I think that I always find that's interesting is, of course, you know, we're right now, a lot of the discussion certainly is around the fact that we tend to be in a partisan country. But if you really
That's a very polite way to put it, sir.
If you boil it down, what's fascinating is everybody in a general sense wants the same thing. It's just a matter of how we go about getting it. I mean, if you really think about it, everyone talks about, you know, what is it? You know, safe communities, clean streets, good schools, job opportunity, and so forth. But ultimately, I guess as the saying also goes, the devil's in the details. And it's how we actually accomplish those things. But I think at times, if we could stay focused, obviously, on the fact that fundamentally we want the same thing, and how do we figure out how to get there? And you know, and ultimately, I think that's one of the good roles that I think the chamber plays, oftentimes in the business community as well, is that we can be, you know, that convener. And a matter of fact, that's even one of the words that's used in our national association. There was a study that was done a few years back, and it talked about the role of the chamber. Kind of, it was like I think it was a 2020 or the chamber the next 20 years or something. It was to that effect. But it really talked about the chamber being that convener in terms of at times bringing in disparate parties and so forth for the betterment of the community.
Yeah, and Leonardo, you made a great little segue there. A couple weeks ago, you and I participated in a presentation for, like, I guess, a homeowners association. That's probably the easiest way to explain it. About why do you want to join a chamber? And you and I got to pair off and share our thoughts and feelings about why that is. But I think that's a great segue into the first segment of our show, which is who, what, where, when, why, how. So I'm going to chat with you for that for a few minutes, and then Allison's going to take you through some of the leadership stuff. Because you took over a well-established mantle. That's the most polite way to put it.
Yeah.
And so the challenges and the successes and the ups and the downs, that's what we want to get from you in that segment. But very plainly, tell us about who is Leonardo McClarty and what is the Howard County Chamber.
All right. Well, so I'm, excuse me, son, husband, father, native of the Metro Atlanta area, truly having grown up, spent my whole life in Georgia, up until college, went to school in South Carolina, both for graduate and undergraduate, and then went back to Georgia to work. And interestingly enough, it was one of those things, probably didn't really think I would leave the state. That's where my family is, from grandparents to parents to cousins and uncles and aunts and all that kind of stuff. And ultimately, but as life would have it, a change in the family and seeking new opportunities ultimately took me from Georgia to southern PA, where I was there for probably actually only about 6 months before I was able to pivot and realize, I kind of like this chamber thing, and was able to come back here to Howard County. And so we've been here now about 7 years. And so I was in York, Pennsylvania.
Okay. I was in Westchester, so southern Pennsylvania, but other tip.
Okay. Yeah, so it was definitely interesting and good experience, but certainly have enjoyed being here.
So talk to us a little bit about the Howard County Chamber. I mean, you and I have touched on that already in this episode. From your position as the CEO and president, who do you serve? How do you serve? What do you like to serve?
Yeah. So, as you mentioned kind of in the intro, we're a business organization and really focused on, at large, the business. And even at times I broaden it to say the employer community, because certainly there are things that if you're, say, a not-for-profit or maybe a community college or what have you, that, only thing that's different at times between them and any of the other companies is the fact of the tax status. But ultimately, you have a lot of the same struggles, whether that's personnel, whether that's, you may call it sales, someone in nonprofit calls it development. At the end of the day, you're trying to get somebody to either utilize a service or give you money. So again, tomato. But for us, we ultimately, I like to say, we're about people, policy, and prosperity. And people is really at times helping connect people to one another that could either be partners, could utilize each other's services. Other times people is about the development of people. So we do a number of seminars, workshops, conferences, all with dealing with at times personal growth or professional growth in terms of how can you be a better business professional in your particular craft. And then the other times we get into the policy, and that's where we really work closely with our elected officials as well as appointed officials on those things that we feel will either help the business community or at times actually be adversarial and hurt the business community. And so really trying to be a partner there and work with them on and give them insights as to what's going on in the mind of a business professional or what have you. And then the prosperity piece really gets into the economic growth and success and viability of Howard County. And so that's where, again, it kind of ties back and connects with the policy side, but we work closely with a host of different community and regional partners, again, on quality of life efforts. So, oftentimes we're partnering with the Economic Development Authority, Howard County Tourism, Leadership Howard County. But at the same time, on a regional level, we work closely with the Maryland Chamber. We work closely with our other neighboring business organizations and BWI Partnership, Central Maryland Chamber, and you name it, on efforts there, really looking at the fact of, yes, we're focused on Howard County, but there are times where if the region is successful, Howard County will be successful. And so For us, we also serve predominantly a small business community. I think oftentimes that's perhaps a misnomer of the chamber in the sense that obviously they may look at our sponsors and of course they see the likes of, the M&T banks and the BGEs and the PNCs and so forth.
The big guns.
Yeah, but ultimately, when you really boil down at our chamber as well as a chamber in general, probably for us about 70 to 75% easily of our membership are small businesses. They're, probably easily 25 to 50 employees or less, which actually mirrors Howard County as well. So I think that's one of those things as well. It's a lot of the things that we do is really geared towards small business and how can we support them in their growth and development, recognizing lastly that small businesses do create the lion's share of jobs, but even from a community involvement standpoint, if you go to any of our neighboring, parks and you look in the I use this story all the time. If you look in the outfield, chances are, and you see those signs on the outfield, I would easily say 8 out of 10, they're from small businesses. That's the folks that are supporting the little leagues, that are supporting the schools with pizzas and punch and cookies and so forth. And so certainly,
and they're paying for that sign, and that sign helps fund the athletics. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. So ultimately, I think if you have a viable small business community, you have a viable county.
Yeah, Leonardo, you touched on something. I just want to crystallize it for our audience real quick, and then we're going to move on to the next segment. Allison and I talk about sales a lot. And if you are in business, there is a sales component to your business. Now, in a retail store, it's very transactional. Maybe you don't have salespeople. Somebody's buying a stick of gum for you. And if you're doing it right, you're making a profit off of selling that stick of gum.
Right.
That's the general tempo. But a lot of people will scoff and say, oh, well, I joined a chamber and I didn't get any customers out of it. And Allison and I started this show because there's a lot of bad salespeople out there. There's a lot that they don't get it, and they're not trying to get it. Right. And they think, oh, well, if I join a chamber, all the members are going to want to become customers of mine. And that's not true. You have to put in effort. When I first approached you, we had been members of the Howard County Chamber for several years, but we hadn't been doing anything with the membership. And I said, well, we have this resource. Let's make it a valuable one. And I said, I want to get involved. I'd like to be on the ambassador committee. And you guys immediately accepted me. And now I'm in front of membership. So to our listening audience, I've said this on at least half of our episodes so far. Get involved, damn it. Get off your butt and do so, because organizations like the Howard County Chamber and nonprofits, they want your volunteerism. And I assure you that getting involved equates long-term business relationships and ultimately fuels the success. Now, it's not the only thing that makes your business successful, but it's a very valuable component. So with that, now that I've strumped everybody up and they want to join the chamber in herds, what's the best way to get a hold of you or the chamber, Leonardo?
So they can easily reach me via email, which is my first initial last name at howardchamber.com, which
That'll
basically is, it's LMCCLARTY at howardchamber.com. They can also visit our website at howardchamber.com. And right on the home page, there's a big green button that says join here. And so if you click
green
that button,
for money, I love it.
It will take you from there. The other thing, though, that I would just say to those that are either contemplating the chamber, and that's whether joining or even staying for that matter, I would always also like to say, beyond the involvement piece, think about specifically, I guess, a few things. One, what are you really trying to accomplish?
Agreed.
There's some individuals that they have the time to get involved in committees. They may have the financial wherewithal to sponsor. We know that there's some that don't. But still, think about everything from what type of programming do you like? Who's your customer? For instance, for some, we really encourage committees because it allows you, particularly if you're one of those people, and I use this example often, if you if you're going to a networking event, and this is traditional times, if you're going to a networking event and you get there and you park your car, you check in your pocket to make sure I got business cards, I got my Banaka spray, or a Tic Tac, you know what, game on. And you get enthused and juiced because there may be hundreds of people.
Yep.
But then you've got that other person that they're like, oh my gosh, my boss told me I need to come to this event tonight. I don't know anybody here. And you walk in and you say, okay, what's the closest corner? and you wait for someone to come talk to you. So if you're that person, that's where I say the committees also can really help with the experience, because now you go into a meeting and there are 8 or 9, 10 other people. You've worked together on some different projects committee-wise. Then when you go to the 100-person, 200-person event, it's like, oh, hey, there's Mike, there's Allison. And immediately the room has shrunk and it doesn't seem so big. So that's one thing. I think just quickly, the other thing is, again, think about what you're seeking in your membership. For some members we have, and they've been members for over 10, 15 years, we may see them twice a year. They may come to the economic forecast breakfast at the end of the year, and it may come to the state of the county or state of the business address earlier in the year. But they they join because of being part of a business community. They want to know what's going on. We keep them plugged in. And that's how they define, that's value for them. Others, it really is about what events can I go to, what committees can I get involved in. So I think the biggest thing also when people make that mistake of saying, oh, well, either I didn't get anything out of it or what have you, it's oftentimes reflecting and thinking about what was it that I was seeking. And even at times, did you reach out to me? Did you reach out to anyone on the chamber staff to say, hey, look, I'm trying to figure out how to, crack this nut. Can you help me? Help me distinguish between an economic speaker, an executive speaker series versus a business after business versus YPN versus GovConnects and so forth. So those are some just tips that I would say in terms of how do you find success in the chamber.
Yeah, I think we could spend the entire episode talking on that, but I cannot wait to get some of your thoughts on leadership, and Allison's going to drive you through that part of the show. So Allison, take it away.
And I'll pull a Mike card here. Key bingo moment for audience: ask for help, right? I think as humans, we're hardwired to not do that, as if there's some flaw in admitting we don't know how to do things, and you nailed it, right? Like, just ask somebody for a little direction. Ask for help. And I think that's applicable to all of our affairs, right? In business, as leaders, as salespeople, as just in our family, like, hey, I don't know how to do this, right? It's like we're just hell-bent on being, well, I'll just speak for myself, independent. I figured it out, and I, right? And man, you took me back to when networking was a thing. It's like Mike and I were saying before this show, we're almost a year to the day of being virtual. And I'm both, right? I'm both like super outgoing, and I'm a great faker. I have a great smile, courtesy of mom, who was a dentist, right? And it's like, I can fake my way through it. But I got to tell you, I'm in the parking lot going, oh my God, why did I agree to do this? And I remember that, and then before you know it, you talk to 1 or 2 people, and then it's, you just get it going. So I love your suggestions there and what you planted the seed for. And again, I'm a Columbia resident. I love Howard County for a lot of reasons. So, and I also feel bad. Mike's so involved, and I'm like, damn, what am I doing, right? So last week, I will say I donated a bunch of money. So that's what I did last week.
Hey,
I am.
You know what? Money helps.
Yes. Like, literally don't have time right now to do all the things I want to do, but I can donate some money, and so I did. But
hey. You know what? Real quick, there's 3 T's for a reason. It's time, talent, and treasure.
Yes.
And sometimes if you
love that.
Yeah. So sometimes if you can't give your time, certainly you can give some treasure.
I treasured. I sent it off. So yeah, thank you for that. So I don't feel bad anymore. But anyway, so tell us, what were you doing in Georgia? Did it must have translated up to the chamber, right, from a leadership perspective?
So I was started out my career in economic development, and so I was working for the state of Georgia for a state agency called the Department of Community Affairs. And I was in one of their newly established regional offices where at that time, they were really trying to match a lot of the resources that the state had with other communities. Georgia, one of the big things, and you kind of got a glimpse in a different way during the elections this year, but Georgia, for probably the last 25 years, there's been this saying within the state that there's two Georgias, that you've got the metro Atlanta area, then you've got the rest of the state. And so at the time, he ended up being a U.S. senator, but at the time, Governor Zell Miller was really trying to bridge the resources and try to break that divide and bring a number of the state resources to elsewhere. So they created these statewide offices. And so I was in one of those offices, which really allowed me to better understand some of the state programs and resources, because my whole job was to meet within my region, to meet with different cities, counties, find out what their issues were, and connect them to resources at the state. Ultimately was there at DCA for about a year before moving to another state agency, which was a startup state agency. And so certainly that one was, I think I've been fortunate at times to read the writing on the wall and just have a sense of when things aren't going well. And that one was kind of mired in politics. And I think I was there again for about a year before moving to the DeKalb County's Economic Development Office, where I was there for almost 4 years. And that's where I really got a chance to see local government, economic development up close and personal. Okay. And from a leadership standpoint, and I think this was one lesson for me that I've really tried to take to heart, I was fortunate that I had a director that ended up seeing at a young age, hey, he can do more. And so she got contacted from another city in the metro area about an economic development director's position. And she called me in her office and she said, hey, look, Leonardo, I was contacted. This job, and she was honest. She said, it's too junior for me, but I think it would be perfect for you. And so I ended up interviewing, ultimately got hired, and became economic development director for the city of Roswell. And so was there, and so interestingly enough, was there about, I guess, maybe close, I don't know if it was close to a year, but so I would say first lesson for me in leadership was when you have someone that's don't be so focused on yourself, that if you have someone that's talented on your team, help them grow. Yes. And if they can grow with you, that's fine. If they have to grow someplace else, you know what? Help them along. And so, but the second, I would say, lesson that I learned was after being in Roswell, and I was happy, I get contacted by the DeKalb Chamber. And so saying, hey, they were going through some, reorganization and so forth. And ultimately would I, have an interest in a position. And ultimately ended up throwing my hat in the ring and got hired. And so I think the second thing is, you truly don't know where the relationships that you build and develop, where they'll take you. And so some of the people I was working with at the DeKalb Chamber, I met when I was in DeKalb Economic Development. So thus, when I left and having worked, that's when they ended up bringing me back. And I jokingly say the gentleman that had been he was my board chair, I guess my second year there. I always tell the story, he hired me twice because he worked for Georgia Power, which is like the BGE equivalent. Okay. But David was an executive on loan to the county when I first came to the county in economic development. So here it is, I was 2 years out of graduate school and he was on the interview panel when I went to work for the county. Ultimately, I worked for him for about a year before he went back to Georgia Power. Fast forward some years, when I come back to head the DeKalb Chamber, he's on the DeKalb Chamber Board of Directors as the incoming chair.
How about it?
And so thus he was on the interview panel. So I always say he hired me twice.
I love that.
And, and so I think that also gets into just, again, trying to do the best job that you can, regardless as to where you are, build and leverage relationships because you don't know where they'll take you. And I think that experience there, and so I ended up being at the DeKalb Chamber for almost 10 years and truly was prepared, and it went through so much. Because, so Mike, you touched on it here. Howard County's chambers was well established, and the mantra here was more so make us better. When I went in DeKalb, it was like rebuild. And here it is. I'm 31 years old at the time. Didn't know what I didn't know, and went through everything.
I'm
from
48. I still don't know what I don't know.
Went through everything from getting caught up in political issues to trying to figure out how we're going to make payroll, to dealing with ulcers, to even the turmoil of of a miscarriage, with my wife on our first child. All of those things, in the mix of that probably first 5 years and so forth. But I will say, fortunately, having gone through a number of things at a young age, I think as they say in sports, now I'm at a place where the game has slowed down. And so there's a lot you can recognize sooner. And as my mom likes to say, there's no substitute for living. That there are just some things that I think in leadership, if you're fortunate to get in a leadership position and you're in there for a long enough time, you just learn things. Just quickly, I've shared with some, I think one of the things that has made it difficult for this pandemic for some is that, I say, okay, as an example, let's just say if you're 60, 65, you had the 80s downturn and real estate market issues and economy first, then you go into the boom of the 90s, and then you get the dot-com bubble, and then you go into the recession of 2008, then you come into this. So you've got all of these experiences that you can draw from. So Mike, like you, I'm 48. So obviously in the 80s, you and I were just trying to stay home and watch the Spaceship Challenger.
That's right.
But we at least had, if you go back professionally, we at least had, say, the 2008 downturn. Yeah. And particularly I was running a chamber at that time and could leverage those experiences and things that we did from that stretch of roughly, say, late 2007 to 2009 or what have you, to pull from. But you figure if you are a millennial, you didn't have that to pull. So I think the thing is being able to pull from each experience just helps you for the next challenge to be able to try to weather those storms.
I love that. And I love what you shared. One, I love that I'm so much younger. I'm 35. So I'm like, all right, I was just getting started on my life here. Thank you for that. But what you said about giving space for people around you and behind you or underneath you, right? That, for me, that's my takeaway today. And I think, for anyone diving into entrepreneurship, that is a great takeaway for them too, right? Like, there is space for all of us, right? Just because someone else is winning or talented doesn't mean you aren't, or you're not going. And that used to be, I know how I operated, just because I was so afraid, right? That I wasn't going to get my part too. And the reality is there's room for all of us. And think that way, we automatically get more because more people are going to be willing to help us, right? Yes. And want to be in our corner. So awesome to hear from you today, and awesome to have you on the show. Thank you so much. Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, Leonardo, I think we could talk to you for 3 or 4 hours and still not even scratch the surface. We burned through your time already. And we love when episodes go like that. Yeah. There was just this tremendous flow, and we're going to have to do another episode where we focus on some different stuff with you, because like I said, you just scratched the tip of the iceberg for us today. So thank you so much. For being on the show today.
And would definitely love to come back. And so just this was fun. And like you said, we did go through the time pretty fast, which is always good. Yeah. So whenever I'll be available.
Wonderful.
Leonardo.
Thank you.
And again, for our listening audience, thank you for listening to Mike and Allison After Hours. Or if you're on the Advantage Industries YouTube channel, thank you for watching. And remember to give the show a like, a comment, share it on your social media, because we are giving away Andrew Freedman's book, Thrive. And for you business owners with 10 or more employees, you can win a 1-hour coaching session from Andrew Freedman and his company, Shift. So for Allison Haas and Leonardo McClarty, I am Mike Sheila. And remember, people helping people. It's powerful stuff.
Thank you for joining Mike and Allison After Hours. Tune in next time for another great business owner sharing valuable industry ideas. Want to be a guest on our show? Contact us at answers@getadvantage.com.